Yo, I'ma be honest, I have a genuine addiction. Like, it's genuinely getting bad at this point. As you may know, I am constantly reading manga. I finish one, I pick up another one immediately. And at some point, I got a little worried that breezing through manga like this, just going manga after manga, every manga would lose its value and they'd all start to blend into me. But that hasn't been the case. Each and every manga I've read has had its own unique feel that has left an impression on me. Except Boruto. But it's true, they're all so distinct to me. Even certain music reminds me of specific series. Like, when I think of Kagurabachi, I think of Thick of It by KSI. And occasionally, I read a manga where the vibes are so immaculate. Every time I read it, I get a warm, fuzzy feeling inside. I felt like a little kid again. Those series that make you say, man, I wish I could read that for the first time again. Knowing that you'll never find anything that gives you that exact same feeling again. I've only felt that way about a couple series in my life. One Piece, Vinland Saga. And then we have Soul Eater and Fire Force. And so, even more rare than that feeling is the chance to feel it again. And while I'll probably never read another Vinland Saga in my life, somehow I was lucky enough to find another Soul Eater. Gachiakuta, a manga about trash. Now, when I first set out to make this video, I thought I was making some astute observation that no one had thought of, but it turns out everybody, including the mangaka, has compared Gachiakuta to Soul Eater and Fire Force. It was marketed as a spiritual successor to Fire Force when it premiered, but I'm willing to take it a step further. I'd argue that Gachiakuta is not only its successor, but also its superior.
What is this?
Blasphemous, I know, but hear me out. After catching up to Gachiakuta in the span of about 5 days, I honestly believe this has a chance to be one of the best manga ever made. And it's all because it's taken what its predecessors have done and perfected it. But before we get into how Gachi compares to Soul Eater, we gotta talk about the manga itself. The world of Gachiakuta is split into two groups. We have the rich side, never hungry, never thirsty, and always ready to flex on a nigga. Then we have the other side, the tribesfolk. They're the poor faction, kept in the slums where the rest of the city can ignore and look down upon them. The people that live here are considered the trash of the world. It's full of the descendants of infamous criminals, one of which being our main character, Rudo, whose parents are known as heinous murderers. How true that is yet to be seen. But you know, rich people, poor people, that's all pretty normal. But the world of Gachi has one more unique aspect. The existence of the Abyss. It's this giant hole that's just in the middle of the city, and no, you did not accidentally click a video about Made in Abyss. This abyss is way different, at least in function. The society Rudo lives in is obsessed with the discarding of trash. They often throw any item that's even slightly broken into the abyss, even if it's fixable, something Rudo hates about them, which is why he becomes the trash vandal who steals trashed items and fixes them up. It was kind of weird to me that the main character's hobby is playing with trash, but just stick with me, you'll see the vision. But this trashing mindset isn't just limited to objects. It also extends to undesirable people. Those that are accused of heinous crimes such as murder are thrown into the abyss, such as Rudo's father. So when Rudo gets framed for the murder of his mentor and father figure Regto, what do you think happens to him? Yep, he gets thrown into that hole too. So now his ultimate goal is to get back to the top and get revenge on these sky people, also known as the Spheroids. This is when we're introduced to the people in the abyss, also known as the surface, and find out it's not just a bunch of trash down here, even though there is a shit ton of trash, but there's peoples and cities and civilization and giant trash monsters. And it was at this exact moment that the Soul Eater comparison started to hit me, because as soon as we get to the surface, the whole world is steeped in this feeling of surrealism. You instantly feel that this is a completely different world and none of the rules that we abide by apply. Like off rip, as soon as Rudo gets there, he's attacked by people who want to kidnap him, showing that this world is somewhat lawless, but not completely. Governance in manga are really interesting to me, and it's a quality Gachi shares with Fire Force and Soul Eater. We have the janitors. I know that sounds lame as f, but they're cool. Trust me, they're cool. I promise. They are our meisters, our fire companies, and they are cool as shit. As the name implies, it is the janitor's job to clean up, but they don't clean up regular trash. They clean up these giant fucking monsters running around everywhere. And we'll get into the janitors more later, I promise. But for right now, I want to talk about all the different factions and locations that exist within the world of Gachiakuta, and how the world building of Gachiakuta has already begun to surpass that of Soul Eater. And that's saying a lot. Soul Eater's world building is already some of the best Shonen has to offer, and it's clear that Gachi's world building is heavily inspired by it. I mean, just looking at the structure of the janitors, they have the South Branch, the Central HQ, the East Branch, the West Branch. It is very reminiscent of the way that Shibusen was run, or the DWMA, whatever you want to call it. But I think where Gachi separates itself is how it focuses on the other factions that are not a part of our main crew, like the witches in Soul Eater. It was really cool figuring out how they structure themselves, what their goals symbols are and how they've affected the history of Soul Eater. And we get introduced to all these different kind of monsters that come from different locations, different clans and stuff. And I always just wish that we focused more on that. And I think that's what makes Gachakuta's world building so interesting in comparison. Aside from the janitors, we have so many groups with their own culture and way of policing things that just makes them feel like they have their own independent history that contributes to the shared history of the entire surface and possibly the sphere. Like the Hellguard, who police criminals, and unlike the janitors, feel way more loyalty to the surface itself, almost to a religious degree, which causes them to clash with the janitors pretty often because the janitors, on the other hand, are pretty reckless and more independent. And it makes sense because a military force probably wouldn't like that. You know, they like structure and stuff. And we haven't seen much of the Hellguard, but we already have a good feel for what their priorities are and where they fit in the grand scheme of power on the surface. It's shown really well in the conversation between the leader of the janitors and the leader of the Hellguard. The Hellguard wants to take Rudo and test his DNA to see how the sky people relate to the people on the ground. And just from that alone, you can tell that the Hellguard seem to value the development of the surface and its strength over being humanitarians. Not a lot of personal feelings involved in what they do. I think it's shown best in the Hellguard motto. There are many threats to those who live on the ground. Trash beasts, raining, refuse, illness caused by toxic material. But we must never forget, the greatest threat of all is human being. And to be honest, with the way things are going in the current manga, it's hard to disagree with that. But by far, my favorite aspect of the world building is how the trash affects everything. I already mentioned the trash beasts, who still really don't make any sense to me, but we'll ignore that. There's the no man's land, where the toxicity from the trash has become so much that you can't stay there for too long or you'll just die. It's always fun when they go to no man's land because they have to wear these masks to protect themselves. It gives me real Tokyo Ghoul vibes, even though Rudo's mask is not tough. I'm gonna be honest. Maybe it'll grow on me, but right now, nah, gang. Another reason the trash is so important is it kills people. When people throw their trash down to the ground, sometimes it hits people on the head and sends them to the woo. And so a lot of the major cities are covered in domes that protect people from getting squashed. Even though some people purposefully don't go into the domes because they think that the trash is some religious symbol and they praise the trash as if it is some gift from the gods, which is also just another great tidbit of world building that makes sense for the kind of world that they're in. But my favorite of these cities is Canvas Town. All the artists live here because people don't let them draw anywhere else, and they are given free reign to graffiti all over the place. There's a bunch of cool artwork everywhere. They even have these special murals for the leader of each generation to draw a picture that represents them. I love Canvas Town. I would live there. I would 100% live there. And all of this amazing world building, especially Canvas Town, is accentuated perfectly by the way that it's depicted through the art style. The art is probably the most direct comparison you can make between Soul Eater, Fire Force, and Gachi. They even have those colored covers in a lot of the chapters, just like Soul Eater and Fire Force do, that have their own unique style separate from the main series. I've screenshotted so many of those. There's so much style to the way that they're drawn. Shit is prime wallpaper material. I love loose art styles, shit like One Piece and obviously Soul Eater, and Gachi does it better than any manga I've ever seen. And the beauty of Gachi and Soul Eater's art is the fact that they value conveying emotion over anything else. They aren't concerned with being anatomically correct or even having movements that make mechanical sense. It's all about getting across a feeling. And calling an art style inconsistent and loose might sound like an insult, but here it makes the art so much more impactful and dynamic. And it's not just with one emotion or the other. This art works with every emotion you could ever possibly want to portray. You feel what the characters are feeling without even having to read the words. The way some characters' faces contort with rage, or sometimes when people get sad, their face starts to droop as if it's gonna fall off their head. Even the way people's faces twist during the humorous scenes, it makes the humor hit way better too. And it's important to be able to show this extreme emotion because our main character Rudo is kind of crazy, and he'll have these occasional mental breaks. And whenever that happens, we get this insane interpretive art that, again, is not grounded in reality at all, but it works to show how Rudo's mental state is decaying upon itself. Gachiakuta loves showing these interpretive panels, a lot like Soul Eater did. Like when Soul and Maka were being controlled by Arachne, the panels of them as puppets being controlled by string, some of my favorite panels in the entire manga. And Gachiakuta does a similar thing really well. Like this one panel of chains coming out of a character's mouth. Were chains actually coming out of this nigga's mouth? No. But it gets across the feeling that Rudo is having in that moment. But if I had to pinpoint one thing that sets Gachakuta's art apart from the others, it's gotta be the angles. Gachi is littered with these upward and downward angles that give the panels a cinematic feel I really have only felt in manga like Kagurabachi or Bleach. Having those angles on top of the expressiveness of the art itself creates an atmosphere unlike any other I've ever experienced. And because of how dynamic the manga is usually, it creates an insane contrast when they really want to slow things down. There have been times in Gachiakuta where I've turned the page and I've been absolutely speechless. In certain shots, you can just feel the stillness in the air from all the empty space. It's so well done. And almost more importantly than anything else I've said so far, the art style gives so much more personality to the characters. Characters are like the most important thing to me when determining how much I like a story, and Gachi is full of lovable, cool, intriguing characters. And the characters are so distinct in Gachiakuta. Usually when I'm reading a manga, it takes me a while before I actually start remembering characters and their names and stuff. But as soon as we meet the janitors, whether it be because of their design or because of their personality, they all jump off the page immediately and all stick in your mind so distinctly. One of the first people we're introduced to is Rio. I love Rio. That's my motherfucking dog. And when we're first introduced to Rio, the first impression I get is, this girl is really nice. She's really outgoing. She's definitely going out of her way to make Rudo feel welcome, but she also seems unhinged, and we only get to see more of that as the series goes on. Or another character like Delmon. At first, he annoyed the out of me. I kept asking myself, who is this big nigga and why do he keep screaming? But after learning about his backstory and his history with his wife, he quickly became one of the more lovable characters in the group. Keep Delmon in the back of your head because I will talk more about him in a little while. Another one that stood out to me immediately was Dia Santa, and yes, you are looking at this right. This nigga does have a pacifier in his mouth, and he keeps it in always. He does not talk, he just sucks on that pacifier to communicate. But that's what I mean. Every character has their own thing, and it's not like in other series where it's like, yeah, everybody has their thing, but some people's thing is more important than other people's thing. Everybody has some unique trait that allows them to take the spotlight when the time is right, including the nigga with the pacifier. And even outside the janitors, the villain group also has some cool ass characters like Jabber. Jabber is one of the main reasons I even started reading this manga, because his character design was so raw and he did not disappoint. Being basically the first major antagonist we come across, Jabber introduces the first taste of horror we get in the series. Like, look at these panels. The heavy shading, again, the contortion of his face to make him look inhuman, on top of the insane dynamic movement, it just makes Jabber come across deeply unsettling. And I'm gonna be honest, it definitely matches his personality. Bro is a weirdo. And then we have the leader of the villain group, Zodil, who is one of my favorite villains right now. He gives me so many Crollo vibes. Niggas know how much I love Crollo. He's not only like Crollo in design, but also in the way that he operates. They're both very unemotional, but curious. They're very interested in learning new things, even if it comes to the detriment of other people, which makes Zodil absolutely terrifying because a lot of the times we are going after the same thing. We're looking for the same treasure or the same hint to get to the next step, and ultimately we kind of have the same goal, but the difference is he's willing to let everybody else die to get to that goal. And then within the group there are also more interesting characters. Another one of my favorites is this lady with the long hair. She also adds a little bit to the world building as well, because she comes from the warrior tribe of Celea, a tribe that has more or less been wiped out in the recent years, but Noaire's story of being essentially the last member of her family to survive is very heartwarming. And she has this cool ass fight with Rio that is one of the best fights in the entire series. And speaking of fights, why don't we get to the power system of Gachiakuta? One of, if not the best power system in any new gen manga. Jinki, or vital instruments, or whatever you want to call them. I'm gonna call them Jinki because vital instruments sounds boring as Jinki as a power system are so cool because the particular ability that you're going to be facing off against is completely random, because Jinki can literally be anything. For some people it's their pajamas, for some people it's claws, and for some people it's a pacifier. Yes, he gets his powers from the pacifier. And the range of what Jinki can do is essentially limitless because they basically do whatever the user created them to. We have more simple combat oriented Jinki like Rio's scissors that cut things like scissors, or another one of our main characters, Engine, who has this cool bladed umbrella that can like cut shit in 8 different directions. Engine is also cool as He's the first of the janitors that we meet, and he's probably the one that's closest to Rudo overall. And then we have less combat-oriented Jinki that are more about their utility. Like, one character has this manhole cover that they can use to teleport things. It's like whack-a-mole. They pop out of one hole, cover it back up, pop out of another hole. Yeah, they end up causing big problems for the main characters. There are even Jinki for casting spells. In Canvas Town, there is a magical pen that is passed down to each subsequent leader of the town. And with that pen, they can draw things to give people literal buffs, like it's an RPG. There's just so much diversity in what Jinki can do, and I'm really interested to see more of them. Oh, I almost forgot. One of the characters in the villain group, her Jinki is headphone, and if she touches you, she can hear your thoughts. That shit is raw as fuck. But none of this is what really makes Jinki so special. What actually makes them special is how they're crafted to begin with. Because unlike other power systems where your power is something that you're born with or is something that you train to obtain, there is only one way to gain the power of a Jinki. And that is to have an object that you care about so much that it is almost a part of you. And by caring for and loving an object, you will be able to bring the power out of that thing. And because of this, every single Jinki is so much more special. And it gives you a deeper understanding of the characters because their Jinki is going to be directly related to what they value in life. Like Delmon, we talked about him before. You know what his Jinki is? A little water hose gun. And your thought would be, well, that's random. Why would this big ass nigga think about watering shit? But it all ties into his backstory with his wife. On the surface, it is very hard to grow plants because of all the toxic waste and the trash everywhere. It's hard. And Delmon's wife loves plants, but it's not likely that they're gonna be able to get them down here. But Delmon still takes all of his time and effort and eventually is able to get some level of plant life. It's really special to him and his wife and is emblematic of their bond. And now that she's gone, it makes sense that this would be his most prized possession. But what really brings this whole power system together is the main character, Rudo. Because Rudo's Jinki is a pair of gloves. I know you're thinking, what the fuck is he gonna do with a pair of gloves? Is he gonna turn them into like giant hands? Or is he gonna be able to shoot blasts from his hands? No, it's way better. But to understand Rudo's ability, you first need to understand Rudo himself. We talked about Rudo and his trash escapades, but we never really talked about why he did it. In the world that Rudo grew up in, a lot like our world, people are quick to discard things and people as trash and worthless. Rudo hates this mindset. It's why he goes through the trash and finds these objects that, in his mind, have been prematurely abandoned. Because to Rudo, there is no such thing as trash. Nothing and no one is worthless. Everything that exists has a purpose. It just needs someone that cares enough to bring that purpose out of it, which is exactly how Rudo's powers work. Essentially, any object that Rudo touches with his gloves, he can turn into a Jinki, bringing out and utilizing the power of that object that is powered by the thoughts and feelings of the owner of that thing. Like, for example, one of the main characters that happens to not have a Jinki has this lucky charm. Every mission that they go on, he prays to this lucky charm so that it will protect them and save them from any danger. So when Rudo gets a hold of this lucky charm and uses its power, it becomes an impenetrable shield. So not only is the power cool as f to me, but it also has a beautiful message behind it. And I just love Rudo's entire demeanor as a character and his internal struggle. Because when Rudo first gets to the surface, his goal is simple. He wants to get back up top and get revenge on all the people that wronged him, meaning the entirety of the society that he comes from. Rudo is a very angry person, and he doesn't really have anyone. He had Regto, who died, and he had this girl that he had a crush on named Chiwa, but she basically ends up disowning him when she thinks that he murdered Regto. And as Rudo learns more about the surface and he gets closer to the janitors, his goals change. Now, instead of destroying the world, he wants to fix it, make a better world for him and the people that he cares about. But that anger doesn't just disappear. It's still there. It's very realistic to trying to change. It doesn't happen immediately. So Rudo still has these moments where he lets his anger slip. He reminds me a lot of Kaneki from Tokyo Ghoul in this way, that they're super nice. They're the nicest person that you'll ever meet. But when they snap, they fucking snap. Like one time when it came to the point where this one character almost got the whole group killed, Rudo just lost it and started beating on her bad. If somebody didn't stop him, Rudo probably would have caught a body right there. And one thing about me is I love a main character with a little bit of edge. And another thing I love is a main character with an interesting perspective. Because of how Rudo is and the position that he was born in, he has a very particular perspective on the world, one in which he usually isn't super quick to judge somebody in their decision. Instead, he understands that everyone's decisions are a product of their circumstance. There's this really good quote that he has near the beginning of the series that is exactly what I'm talking about. I wondered, Why is it that everyone's so concerned about the filth and the crooks, yet no one cares or even considers what would happen if they fell into the abyss themselves? It's a super simple observation, but it hits home at something very interesting. The otherization of people. When someone commits an act that is horrible, or at least perceived to be horrible, it's like people no longer see themselves in that person. They no longer relate to that person. And it's not that they can't relate to that person, it's that they refuse to. Because relating to that person opens up your mind to the idea that you could also commit wrong, that you could also become one of those people that are otherized. And it's this method of otherization that allows the entire Sky Society to exist. This kind of society could not persist without some kind of trash to push away from. And of course, all of this makes the world of Gachiakuta and Rudo way more interesting, but even more so than that, we have the central mystery around the series. Before Rudo ever gets to the surface, there is already a bunch of mystery surrounding his character. One, because we have no idea what happened to his father or why he was condemned, but Rudo's father also left another mystery with Rudo. These scars on his hand. We still have no idea what's up with these scars, why his father gave them to him, or what purpose they may serve. But what we do know is that Regto gives Rudo these gloves to cover them up. At first, we think these are just some normal beat up gloves. Rudo obviously cherishes them because Regto gave them to him, but later on we're told that these gloves are actually much older than we thought, and they were imbued with power long before Rudo got his hands on them. These gloves are a part of the Watchmen series, a series of mythical Jinki that are presumably far beyond any other instrument that we've seen. And it seems like through finding out more about this Watchmen series, we'll be able to find out the origins of this world, the purpose of the Watchmen series, and just how all of this is connected to Rudo's family. Yeah, I bet you didn't expect that, huh? You probably did. But still, trust me, that shit is fire. But yeah, man, that's all I got for y'all boys today. Let me know what you think about Gachiakuta in the comments below. And comment trash down below if you made it to the end of this video. Just confuse all the niggas that didn't make it here. Like the video if you liked the video. Subscribe to the channel. And yeah, man, I'm gone. Damn.